Our theme for this year is with our Insights webinar is the Great Place to Work effect. And this is the idea that great leaders build trust, trust shapes culture, and culture drives performance. So as you can see here, again, these resources are available in the webinar resources section. If you want to pick them up, please do. So great starts with leadership. And why are leaders important? Why is leadership important? Because leaders shape experience. That day-to-day experience that employees have is shaped by the leaders that they work with. Experience shapes culture, and then culture drives performance. And then we're just going to go to the next slide. I'm going to really build out this great place to work effect just a little bit. So we look here at under leadership. So again, great starts with leadership. So Great Place to Work has identified 9 what we call high trust leader behaviors. And that's really the focus of these Insights webinars. It's about leader behaviors. Today, we're going to be looking at inspiring and speaking, and we're really linking that to an organization's purpose. Because it really matters to employees. It has a really high impact on employee experience. So we've done a number of the other leader behaviors. If you want to go back to our webinars on our website and check those out. And there you can see those 9 high trust leader behaviors, and they impact the experience that employees have. That, like I said, that day to day, this is where we look at trust, pride, camaraderie, and for all. So what kind of experience is everyone having? It's so important to, not kind of generalize, like what kind of experience is everyone having, not just the average employee. And then culture. So experience shapes culture. I like to look at culture as an outcome, right? It's an outcome of the behaviors we reward, encourage, and ignore. It's how things get done in our organization. It's norms and traditions. That's the culture. You can see there, lots of organizations will describe their cultures in different ways. And then ultimately, culture drives performance. Whether you are a for-profit, nonprofit, charitable organization, all organizations have performance metrics that they track. Right. Some are mentioned here, profitability, productivity, efficiency. Maybe it's attraction, retention. It could be impact on the communities that you serve. So again, ultimately leading to that performance. So great starts with leadership. Why? Because leadership experience shapes culture, and culture drives performance. So that is the Great Place to Work effect in a nutshell. And now I'm going to introduce the people that you actually came here to listen to, not me. So I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. We have Robert Burko, who is the CEO and founder of Elite Digital, a full-service digital marketing agency providing a wide range of services to help businesses succeed in the digital world, including website design, graphic design, SEO services, custom software development, and paid social media advertising. So welcome, Robert. Happy to have you here today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. And then next up, we have Justin Weaver, who is the manager of diversity and culture at Raymond James. And they are an organization that provides trusted financial advice, personalized wealth management, and sophisticated investment solutions for individuals, families, and institutions across Canada. Great to have you here, Justin. And then we also have Tan Ewan, who is the VP of Total Rewards at StackAdapt, which is an advertising platform that enables users to distribute and promote content using real-time data-driven audience targeting. So Tan, glad to have you here as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is ask all 3 of our panelists individually, what's rattling, I'll use the expression, what's rattling around in your brain right now? As a leader, working with people, what are you thinking about? Maybe what's keeping you up at night? Kind of like I said, what's rattling around in your brain? So Robert, I'll start with you.
Yeah, no, great question. My brain's a scary place, so let's talk about what's rattling around in there. I've been doing this for a very long time, so I've seen sort of a lot of transformation. Like I remember when social media was new, not to date myself, but I remember when that didn't exist, and then I was featured in a CBC documentary about it being new, and it changed everything in my industry. Now we're on the precipice of a new evolution, which is the AI evolution. And obviously that's changing everything. It's going to touch my industry, every industry, and sort of how do we navigate that? I could tell you at Elite, our big metaphor is AI is the wand and you're the wizard. And it's those 2 things working together that make it special. So that's how we're approaching it. But it's also changing so fast and evolving so rapidly that making sure we stay ahead of the curve. Our staff are trained up on how to use it, right? It's a tool in our toolbox. But how do we make sure we're set up for success in this AI revolution that's upon us? it's happening fast and there is no rule book. There's no research I can read on here's what's happened in the past. This is all new uncharted territory. I often say we're on the train building the track and the track is changing. The pieces are changing as we go. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting time for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And Justin, how about you? What's rattling around in your brain right now?
Absolutely. Well, I think top of mind for me is how much change people are navigating right now.
Hmm.
There's so much economic uncertainty. Like Robert said, all of the investments in AI is causing some uncertainty and anxiety. And I think there are a lot of shifting expectations in work, and that all of these things don't just show up in the business, but they show up in people's personal lives too.
Hmm.
And it's becoming increasingly harder to separate the two, your personal life and your professional life. And what I'm constantly coming back to is how do we support people through that change in a way that's practical, in a way that's empathetic, but still helping our organization stay focused and move forward. And I think a big part of that is preparing leaders to be able to have those conversations,
Hmm.
especially when they don't have all of the answers. And so I think that it's important that we are equipping leaders with the skills and competencies to be able to navigate those complex conversations,
Hmm.
and so that they have the confidence to be able to create space for that honest and open dialogue so people are supported and are able to adapt.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. This is all going to play really well when we start talking about purpose, because I think uncertainty and how we anchor people can be really helpful with a stated purpose and a goal. So Tan, how about you? What's rattling around in your brain right now?
So a step at that, what top of mind for us right now is how to manage growth. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of noise in the market at the moment. So, but I think our leaders have done a really great job of creating a stable foundations where people can focus on their work. So what we try to focus on is one, hiring. So we have a lot of roles open, so we want to hire. Second is to define role and responsibility within the organizations. And the third one is to position our leaders for success uh, for our leaders. So that's on my professional life. On my personal life, actually, I just came back from maternity leave. So top of mind for me is our baby every day.
Oh
So
my
it's
gosh,
rallying
amazing.
in my brain after work. So I would say
Yeah.
that's for me for my personal stuff.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Okay, before we get into our first question for our panelists, we're going to do a poll and get everybody who's participating on the line today engaged. So Ethan's going to pull up a poll, and we're just really going to be talking about purpose. So the question is, in your organization, which best describes where you are at today when it comes to employees and purpose and the organization itself and purpose? So purpose is clear and consistently felt. Purpose is clear but not consistently felt. Purpose is clear or inconsistently communicated, or you're not sure and it varies by leader. Because we're talking about today, we're talking about inspiring and speaking and ensuring that people understand more about the organization, where it's going, how you're going to get there. So I will just ask Ethan to give that a minute and then close it up, and then we can share the results. All right, here we go. Okay, so let's see. In your organization, which best describes where you are today? So purpose is clear but not consistently felt is the has 47% of the votes. Then purpose is clear and consistently felt is 31. Purpose is unclear or inconsistently communicated at 17, and then 6% not sure. So almost 50% of respondents said purpose is clear but not consistently felt. So I think that's really interesting, and that's a really great jumping off point for us to talk. So um, our research at Great Place to Work shows that purpose is important for all generations. And it is especially important for younger employees. You know, I think the first thing people do, Tan, you mentioned you've got jobs open, right? So if somebody on this call thought, oh, I'm going to go check out Stack Adapt and see what kind of jobs, what are they going to do, right? They're going to go down a rabbit hole around the organization and see, what does the organization stand for? Like, what is the purpose? What do they do? Right? They're going to look at the organization's website. They're going to use some AI is going to help them kind of look at all, aggregate all of that data and give them a picture of what that organization does. So that's really important, like that an organization can articulate that, because people looking for jobs, that's what they're interested in. And I think there are two ways for employees to really understand the impact of the work that they do, right? And the purpose and the reason they're doing it. First is in organizations where employees have that contact with their customers, right? They have the contact with the end beneficiaries of the work, or they understand the end user, right? Because in some organizations, it can be challenging where employees are further removed. They don't understand that. And then the other piece is from leaders. You all three of you mentioned leadership, right? And how important it is. So this is where we get into, we're going to talk about leadership and purpose and tying it all together. So Robert, I'll start with you. When you think about or hear, inspiring leadership or leaders, what does that look like? What does that sound like in your organization? Even
Yeah,
what does
no,
that sound like from you?
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a great question because it's super important to us because I think leaders have to practice what they preach and I think they have to be authentic. And I think an inspiring leader is one who can lead by example, right? I've seen organizations where people talk about their manager and they say, "My manager has no idea what I do in my day to day," right? How could they understand what I'm going through? And our leaders at Elite Digital, they've done it. They've walked the walk. They've been in the trenches, and not only have they been in the trenches, but to a large extent, they stay in the trenches, right? I see organizations where leaders are off in their ivory tower. And I think it's hard to relate to that when they're over there and they're in a different world. And at Elite, that's not the case. Our leaders are approachable. I have an open door policy, right? One of the things we try to do is be authentic in everything we do and create an environment where people are set up for success, not only to do really good work, but also to have fun while they're doing it. And I think when you have leaders who are invested not only in what are we doing, but the experience of how are we getting it done? Are you enjoying the day to
Mm-hmm.
day? Is there anything we could do to make this better or more fun or more engaging for you? I firmly believe people do their best work when they're passionate about what they're doing, when they're enjoying what they're doing, when they love working with their coworkers. So I think having leaders that cultivate this culture of everything is a team, and that person to your left and that person to your right, they're also trying 110%. And when everybody's in on it, when the culture is so strong that everybody knows what the organization is trying to do, what the organization stands for, you get a lot of momentum. I use an example often with our team. I use a canoe example. And I say, if we all get in a canoe, and I have very talented paddlers, but they're all paddling a different direction, you know what happens? We end up being a bunch of goofballs spinning in a circle in the middle of the lake. But when
Mm-hmm.
everybody has that vision and has that purpose and has that focus, and everyone's
Mm-hmm.
paddling the same direction,
Right.
suddenly you flying across with amazing momentum. And I think
Yeah.
that's really what our leaders do, is they make sure everyone knows we're here. Here's what we're trying to do. We care for you. We listen to you. And we're creating a culture where people don't want to just get the job done. They want to get the job done well because they're proud of what they're doing for themselves, for our clients, and for the team
Mm-hmm.
overall.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. Justin, how about you? What does inspiring leadership look like in your organization?
Great question. At Raymond James, inspiring leadership, it shows up not just in, well, it shows up in how leaders connect people to the outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much around motivational speeches, but really again, making associates feel like they have a genuine stake in our success, and that's because they do. And on a practical standpoint, it sounds like when leaders are explaining, again, not what we're doing, but why it matters and how each person and each role contributes to that. And again, I think ownership is a key component of it, and making sure that we're creating space for associates to shape how that work gets done. Because when people feel like they have a stake and they have ownership and an outcome, inspiration, it becomes easier. It isn't just something that they're communicated to about, but they actually experience it. And that's something that leaders have to, and it's something that leaders, they can't manufacture that when people actually
Okay.
feel
Yeah.
connected to something. So
Yeah.
ownership is a key component.
Okay. And so I'm hearing, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm hearing authenticity. Like people can see through somebody who's kind of saying stuff, but maybe doesn't necessarily believe in it. And this
Mhm.
sort of co-creation. right? Like it's not about
Absolutely.
sort of a top-down approach. Okay, and we're going to talk in a few minutes about your tactical communication strategies. But
Mhm.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. And Tan, how about you? What does inspiring leadership look like at Stack Adapt?
So at Stack Adapt, like inspiring leadership start from day one. So we start when we hire a leader. So when we hire a leader, we look for bar raisers, somebody who has built things from scratch
Mhm.
and our innovative processes. But we also look for these like rare combinations of courage and humility. Because I think when a leader joins our organization, we hand them our most treasured resources, like our dynamic and nimble team. Our CEO actually shared a recent reflection video that captures this perfectly. He challenged all of us to have the courage to live our values every day and for each other. And what that means internally is that you see hear a lot of like, do you have time for a quick huddle? Let's tackle this problem together. How can I help? How can I support? And we really want to make sure that our leaders are constantly self-reflecting. What that means is that, when we try to innovate, you need to reflect. And we are moving at an incredible pace as an organization. We also push our leaders to have radical like candor, to have transparency and high support with our team. So when we hire talent, we don't just hire them for what they can do today, we hire them to grow with us, and we rely on our leaders to do so.
Okay. Great. And what I'm hearing from all three of you as well is it's really this leadership, the values, like and feeling that people are part of your organization. Because sometimes we'll look at what organizations might call best practices, right? And we think we can translate them to our organization, where it's really about, okay, let's take the best of what a lot of organizations are doing. How do we adapt that to our company? Like what is important to our employees and our clients? So thank you all for sharing that. My next question is actually, Justin, I'm going to start with you because I think you mentioned this specifically.
Mhm.
How do we help leaders, or how can leaders continue inspiring people when we are going through challenging times? Like we
Mhm.
talked about, I think there's lots of different words, uncertainty, unprecedented.
Mhm.
So talk to us a little bit about that. How do we ensure that we're staying inspiring when
Yeah.
it's yeah.
No, no, excellent question. And I think going back to that theme of authenticity is important. And to further that, I would say transparency.
Okay.
But I think you have to have transparency paired with a clarity of what are those principles that are important. So, for instance, at Raymond James, over the past year, we did experience a significant leadership transition,
Mhm.
and that naturally created some uncertainty. But what I've appreciated is that our leaders didn't try to overpromise or try to pretend that they had all the answers. Instead, they were very clear on what was not going to change was our values, our priorities, our culture, our focus on our clients. And they also reinforced that our success as an organization isn't tied to just one individual, but it's truly a collective contribution of all of our associates. And so I think that balance is key. Being able to acknowledge that uncertainty, but grounding people in what's remaining stable, I think is what builds that optimism and credibility amongst leadership.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Tan, what would you like to add to that, or tell how this looks in your organization? How do we ensure that leaders can still, inspire people when we're dealing with uncertainty?
Like for me, I think a leader who's inspiring is someone who's take accountability and focus on communicating. Like what Justin said, like we need to
Mhm.
focus on communicating. And as leader, we accept that the world is not perfect in many different forms and ways.
Mm.
And we try to get ahead of we try to look around the corner, try to get ahead of the tough conversations.
Okay.
And I also like to think that it is a two-way street. It's a helpful reminder for leaders that by doing so, they also get better. Because as leader, you need to be comfortable when things are not like you have to think about that not everything's gonna be clear right away or waiting
Mhm.
around or being silent is not good practice. So I think if leaders can focus on communicating, being transparent with the team, and as I mentioned, our leaders at our organization have done a really good job of building a stable foundations. Because by being transparent, by communicating, by getting ahead of all of this, you over time the culture will get on aggregate and become more positive. Because people will feel that they will be they have this like strong foundation of stability
Mhm.
and transparency that they can trust their leaders. So that's how I think about an inspiring leadership and how can you stay
Yeah.
optimistic over time as a
Yeah. Excellent. And I think too, something that just you kind of triggered for me as you were speaking too is, sometimes we not sometimes we need to remember that leaders are employees too, right? So when some there's uncertainty, there's challenges, that sort of thing, it's, how do leaders kind of digest, process themselves, and then how do they show up for the employees that they're supporting? So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Robert, how about you? You mentioned you've
Yes.
been around for a while. So what have you learned? What do you
Yeah, so
see?
on my answer is honestly it's brutal honesty and transparency. And I think that's really the key for us is we don't shy away from our challenges. And I've seen CEOs take the stage in challenging times and it's all rainbows and unicorns and everything is wonderful. And the problem is that becomes lip service. And once your leaders or anyone on your team doesn't believe what is being said, it feels disingenuous, I
Mm,
think it falls apart. And if you don't have that level of honesty and transparency, especially in the challenging times, it's hard to really buy into what's happening, right? So
sure.
at Elite, we make sure we don't run away from our problems, we face them head on. And I think what that does is it creates an environment where people understand how we're making decisions. I
Mm,
often say employees at Elite never think we've done something that came out of left field because they know what our values are. They understand how we're making our decisions. They understand what happens in the good times, in the bad times, in the challenging times. And I think when you have that degree of transparency and people trust their leaders, they trust what I'm saying, they know they're getting the honest truth.
mm,
It's always easier to navigate the good times, but when you're
yeah.
navigating the bad times, it creates this culture of we're doing this together. We're all going to navigate these rocky waters together. We're going to
Mhm,
hold hands and we're going to get through this. And I
mhm.
think that degree of honesty not only inspires the leaders, but it inspires everybody because everyone understands we're going to hold hands and get through this together, but we could believe what we're being told. And that
Right.
level of sincerity, that level of we're on this journey together through the thick and thin, I think makes a world of difference to keep people inspired that, there's a better day tomorrow and we're going to get through this. And I think at Elite, we approach that whether it's corporate challenges or personal challenges. I think Justin said it before, the lines are blurred. Okay. I don't think, we talk about work-life balance. There's work, there's life, but this is all in one big blender. And that's for all of us. And the world's a crazy place. So when we talk about the challenging times, we're not just talking about our balance sheet. We're talking about if this person is going through a challenging time,
Mm,
what can we as a team do to rally around them to help them? Because helping that person is the same to me as helping the organization overall.
wow. That's yeah, absolutely. You can't, and back to what Justin said that you just reiterated, like we can't separate people. You don't leave your personal life, when you turn on your computer or you walk through the door, right? We are all human beings with many things going on in our lives. So the inspiration is how do we inspire people around us to work for the organization, work for our clients, that sort of thing, but also how do we see people as whole people? And I think too, Robert, I'm going to go back to what you're talking about is it's about the good times and the bad times or the challenging times, right? And that people trust. And this is a great place to work. We measure trust in organizations, right? It's do I trust these people that I'm working for? Do I feel that they're credible? Do I feel that they're sharing enough? And if they're not, back to Tan's point, it's am I asking questions? As employees, like we can be involved in that as well. My next question is really I'm going to ask you to share some very tactical things that your organization does when it comes to communicating. So we've talked about being, inspiring leadership. So we're talking about those behaviors of leaders and how they inspire, but tactically, how does that happen? in your environments. You can share whether you're fully remote or you're, hybrid or however your organization works. It's always helpful for the folks that are on the call to understand, what does your environment look like? What are some specific ways that you communicate that they might be able to take back? So Robert, I'll start with you on that one. What are some of the specific ways that you communicate and inspire?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do quarterly town halls, which I think is
Okay.
very important. And that's not just, me and the leadership team standing up, reading off cue cards, and here's our speech, but we open the floor to everybody to ask questions. And I think that's really important because it's not only what do we as leaders want to say, but it's about what do people want to hear. And we have a saying at Elite that we say nothing is off limits. Okay. I tell everybody I keep no secrets. Okay. And the reason I keep no secrets is partly it's easier for me. I don't have to remember what I've said or not said. I've said everything because I believe we could only solve the challenging problems in front of us if we do it as a team. Nothing is done as an individual. I love my sports analogies. I say you play for the name on the jersey, you play for the team on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back, which basically means everything is a team game. And if the team doesn't know clearly what is the game plan, if I march the players on the field and they don't know where they're going to bump into each other. So the fact that we have these quarterly town halls, okay, we do social events, we do performance reviews, we do all sorts of things. And I also think one of the things we do special is we try to keep it conversational and non-corporate-y. Okay, here's the official memo of our goals for this quarter. I don't think people want that these days. And I think, especially the team at Elite, where I'm lucky, everyone at Elite is so awesome, our culture is so special. They know that when I stand in front of them and talk, I'm not reading a speech that was prepared for me by HR and I better say these words. I'm speaking honestly and authentically from the heart and what I'm thinking. And when that hits them, they know they're getting the genuine information, not this corporatized, filtered version of it, that then they have to wonder, what sort of, rosy picture is being painted. And the other thing I would say is frequent communication. Okay. Even between our quarterly town halls, there's always dialogue. People always know what's happening. We're remote 4 days a week. Slack is always buzzing with information.
Okay.
Our company-wide channels are filled with action, from Elite vibes that is just fun social stuff to wishing happy birthdays to corporate announcements and everything else. We believe the best communication is honest, frequent communication. No one is ever sitting back wondering, I wonder what's happening in the company. They know, and they know in real time. And I think that makes it that much more effective.
Okay. Now, Justin, I saw you smile when Robert talked about the corporate messaging. So tell us a little bit about what Raymond James does to communicate, like the practical, tactical things that you do that help with inspiration.
Definitely. I'll share three quick habits that
Okay.
I've noticed. One is around accessibility. So at Raymond James, we're a relatively flat organization, and our leaders are pretty approachable. And so there may only be from your average employee, there may only be two or three levels between you and
Okay.
the most senior executives.
Mhm.
And I think part of that, it helps to enable some of that accessibility. And we also have town halls where folks are invited to ask questions, or informal interactions. And I think that accessibility and visibility really helps to build that trust. Two, I would say, is around inviting the perspectives of others. So when associates bring forth questions or ideas or challenge leaders, oftentimes the leaders will ask them the same question back and ask them, well, what do you think we should do? And I think that's a way that you really promote that co-creation and really operationalize co-creation as well as that ownership. And then I think being intentional about connection. So that, Robert, you mentioned that as well. But I think how we design our internal events is something that we see where that connection is intentionally built in. And so we host an annual conference every year, an internal conference called the National Business Conference. And the conference includes a lot of breakout sessions and a lot of business related content, but it's also a lot of intentional social events that are built into it as well. And so one year I went, and the one of the opening sessions was called "We're Plaid, You're Here," and everyone was encouraged to wear plaid shirts. And it was just a social function. It was a fun event, again, to help break the ice, help get
Mhm.
people to know each other. Because when you have that rapport and relationship with folks, it's easier to be able to share those perspectives and share those ideas or be able to
Yeah.
challenge a leader because you have a relationship with them.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
none of these are really that complex, but they do, I think, make an impact and they do compound over time.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And Tan, how about you? What are some practical, tactical things that your organization does?
So my strategy is something that I borrow from the communication team. So what they told me is to deliver the message directly, say it simply without any jargon.
Yeah.
So for example, like when you're communicating purpose or values or visions, I believe that those are a lot to do with belief, like how you feel, how people can feel about these things, and it needs to go by feeling. So if
Hmm.
the message doesn't seem simple enough, or it doesn't ring true, then I try to like keep iterating on the message over and over again. So that's like something that I learned from the communication team.
I love that. Thank you. So you've mentioned it. Robert's mentioned it. The jargon, and Justin, you smiled when Robert mentioned it. So what I'm hearing is, and for the participants here, it's about just speaking clearly, speaking simply. That's where people feel inspired because it's more relatable, right? If we're just speaking to each other that conversational way, and we're not getting lost in acronyms and those kinds of things. So I picked up on that. Now, what I'm going to do is just to do another quick poll. I just want to see because you're all running businesses, right? Your leaders are running businesses, so sometimes are challenges, right? Like, why might we? Here's the question here: what most often gets in the way of inspiring and speaking well in your workplace? So some of the things, maybe, are your leaders stretched too thin, or do messages change too often, or priorities aren't stable? Leaders don't want to say the wrong thing. There isn't enough listening or dialogue, or maybe there's an other. If there's some other ways that leaders are challenged, or in your organization there's a challenge when it comes to inspiring or speaking. So leaders stretch too thin, messages change too often, leaders fear saying the wrong thing, or there isn't enough listening or dialogue. So we'll just give people a minute there to weigh in on that. While we're waiting for the poll to close, Justin, you said something about putting the question back to the person who asked it. And I had a manager I worked with once, who's still a really good friend of mine, and I would ask her something and she's like, what do you think? And I got to a point where I'm like, I just want the answer. And I started saying that to her. I said, look, I don't have time to think. Just, I want the answer. But it is really important. It is a really important tool to get that person to think about, okay, what would I do? Right. And because it's a
Mhm.
development opportunity too. What would I do? How would I think about this? So
Right.
just thought I would share that
Yeah, for
personal
sure.
anecdote.
And I think that's important because that's why you hire really smart and capable people because you hired them for their ideas and their
Yeah,
perspectives.
exactly. Yeah. Okay. So we'll get Ethan to close the poll, and let's see what might be some barriers. Oh, well, it's fairly evenly split actually. Leaders are stretched too thin. Leaders fear saying the wrong thing. There isn't enough listening dialogue. Those are all 27%. And then messages change too often. I think that's so yeah, it's very, very split. No one particular reason why it might be a challenge. But I think, when we look at organizations, you've all talked about trust, and Tan, I loved what you said about, sort of the iterations, right? Well, I said it this way, maybe it didn't land. I'm going to say it that way, another didn't land. And so you don't have to get it right the first time, right? When we're talking to people, and it's getting that feedback. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you folks about how you measure employees' commitment or understanding of purpose, and the reason your organization works. And we actually had a question it's really kind of related to this, but and I think specific to Robert, but all of you can answer. So although you provide an opportunity for employees to ask questions during town halls, what do you do when they don't trust leadership enough to engage honestly? So there are going to be folks who maybe don't engage honestly. So I think related to that, how do you measure employees' commitment or understanding or willingness? And so, Justin, I'll start with you. How do you measure?
For sure. So we look at both participation and behaviors, And one example of that is we have during the month of May, internally, we call it Raymond James Cares Month because volunteerism is really important to the organization. And that initiative is one of our most widely adopted initiatives, and we track it through things like volunteer hours, the number of causes that organizations, our associates volunteer for. And we also provide associates with 2 dedicated volunteer days of
Hmm.
paid time off that they can use specifically for volunteering.
Hmm.
And we do see very strong utilization of those days for volunteering. And
Hmm.
so that does tell us that, our associates are connecting with that aspect of our purpose in volunteerism.
Hmm.
But beyond that, we do sort of your traditional things as well, like the engagement surveys. And on the engagement survey, we have a question where we specifically ask if associates see a connection between the work they do and broader organizational goals. And I think that that is one of those ways where we are able to see, is it translating? When people have performance goals, do they see how this part becomes contributes to the whole? And so again, it's less around sort of one single metric, but looking
Hmm.
at
Yeah.
various metrics and patterns over time.
Okay. Thank you. And Robert, how about you? So again, that question that came in, how do you ensure? Let me just go back to it. So, um, how do you really ensure that employees are engaging honestly? How do you make sure that every employee is having that opportunity to engage honestly?
Yeah, so we do a couple things. So first of
Okay.
all, I would say that, so I mentioned before we have the quarterly town halls. We also have an anonymous feedback form as well. Because if someone wants to say something, but they're afraid to put their name on it for any reason at all, and I would like to believe at our company, no one's afraid of anything, but I don't want someone to not say something because they don't want to put their name on it. Because I
Mhm.
believe open, transparent dialogue is key. We could solve every problem we're faced with if we know it's a problem. So we do allow for anonymous feedback as well because
Okay.
I want to make sure we hear everything, the good, the bad, whatever it is. We want
Yeah.
to. Now we do the obvious, engagement surveys, and I like that. I get KPIs and charts and a lovely presentation from our amazing HR director, and that's wonderful. But to me, what actually matters more is the day to day. I get to see if people understand the purpose behind what they're doing day to day when they're
Hmm.
collaborating with others. We had a new employee start a couple weeks ago, and I check in with everybody when they start, right? And I say, "How's it going?" Because this is a great pulse check for me. And the response was, I can't believe that every single person I met in the organization in any department was like, "Welcome, let me know if you need anything. I'm here to help. Is there anything I can do to make this better?" They said they couldn't believe that no matter who they spoke to, everybody was eager to help and embrace them in our culture and let them be part of what we're building and welcome them to the team. And engagement surveys aside, when new staff show up and
Mm.
feel that sense of belonging, and here's what we're doing, and jump in the canoe with us, to call back my earlier example, when that happens day to day, as much as I love engagement surveys, that to me means everything. And then the fact that we have, we're 12 years donating to Hospital for Sick Kids and stuff like that. When people understand that the work they're doing, regardless of whether they're working on our nonprofit pro bono clients or someone else, the work that they do empowers the organization to do good things. I always
Mm.
say, we're fortunate enough to be able to use our power for good. I want to make the world a better place. And I think the fact that the entire team at Elite understands we're on that mission and we practice what we preach makes a big difference. And in the day
Hmm.
to day, honestly, when I walk around the office or even just chat with people, you could see it in their eyes, you could see it in their work, and you could see it in their collaboration. And that
Yeah.
to me is the big check mark I'm looking for.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, and it's I'll use the expressions like the leading and the lagging measures, right? Like the survey is going to be a lagging measure because that's based on their experience. Really important to get that data. Also important to get that leading data. Like where are we going? What can I nip in the bud, if you will, right? Like what do I see maybe kind of bubbling up, and how can I get at that? So Tan, how about you? How do you measure employees understanding commitment?
So I look at constructive feedback or criticism.
Okay.
So I believe that when people actively raise concerns or suggest improvement, it means that they still deeply care and invested in the
Mhm.
process.
Okay.
So I really fear silence. So if I don't hear anything, there's
Yeah.
nobody talking about, no feedback, like constructive feedback. then that's what
Interesting.
I fear. Because I think when people wants to make changes, that friction means that they still care about the outcome. They still want to contribute to the outcome. So that's how I measure the commitment and how much employees are engaged.
Wow, that's so interesting, and I think so helpful that silence doesn't mean good or bad, right? And in fact, it could mean that something's not being raised. So I think that's a really interesting way to look at that. Like, let's not take silence. Let's ensure that people are actually sharing constructive feedback, right? And you've all talked about how important it is to be I'll say in this together. Like we are in this together, and leaders sharing that message, and employees, sharing that message with each other about how we care about each other, how important it is that we're working together. We've just got a couple minutes left. I don't see any more questions, so I'll just ask one more question of the panelists. Because we talked a lot about leaders. Like this is again, it's a leadership behavior, right? Inspiring and speaking. How, and anyone can jump in here. How do you develop leaders? Is this something you can develop, or is this something sort of innate? Robert, you came off mute first, so what do you think about
So
that?
I think for me the most important thing, and I'm fortunate. The leaders around me are the smartest, most awesome, and amazing people ever. So I'm a really lucky guy to have amazing coworkers. But I think creating an environment that lets people thrive. I think that's the key thing. Do you know who's responsible for making Elite Digital the best place to work? Everybody. Me,
Mm-hmm.
the leaders, the staff, everybody is empowered. We ask for ideas from everybody. When someone starts at Elite, I say to them right away, I go, there's some companies where they say, you put your head down and you do your job, and that's what you are here to do. And I say, at Elite, it's not the case. We want you to raise your hand. We want you to say, we have an idea. I have an idea on how I can make this place better. I see you doing it this way. Have you explored that way? And it's not to say we always do it, but when you invite everybody to the table, when it's
Mm-hmm.
everybody's responsibility to make this the best place it can be. Because listen, we could all work anywhere we want. People choose to work at Elite Digital because they love it. And the reason they love it is because everybody's in on making this the best place to work. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a real secret sauce for us because once you're in and once you love it and once you know that your job is not only to love it, but your job is to create that environment for the next person, that
Mm-hmm.
creates this
Interesting.
real sort of amazing self-fulfilling prophecy of being a great place where people want to be. When
Okay.
work doesn't feel like work, when it feels like I'm going to go do some productive, projects with my friends, it
Mm-hmm.
changes and reframes
Interesting.
everything. And I'll tell
Yeah.
you, and again, it crosses over, right? When someone has a baby at Elite, we say our team is growing and they get the Elite onesie and we celebrate it and we celebrate weddings and we celebrate births and we celebrate marriage and we
Mm-hmm.
celebrate all of these things because we're all in on it together.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. And then Justin, how about you? How do we develop leaders? What does this look like? Is it innate, or is it something we can develop?
I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think leadership has to be enabled. And
Mm,
I think that from an HR perspective, I think our role is to do just that. And at Raymond James, we provide leaders with clear principles, frameworks, and tools, but then we rely on them to be able to execute and adapt it for their teams. And so, one example of that is, there's been so much talk around sort of return to the office and,
hmm
is it mandate or do you stay remote? And one thing that we've done is in refreshing our approach is instead of having that one size fit all mandate, we've taken a business led approach that is grounded in certain principles. So, leaders assess what their teams need to succeed, and then that is an input that shapes how work happens accordingly. And so I think it's balance. You have
Yeah.
to have clarity at the top, but you need flexibility in execution. And I think that is what makes inspiring leadership, sustainable because leaders are able to, they have tools, but they're able to
hmm
still bring their own individualized style into how they lead. And I think having that
Yes.
flexibility is so important.
Yeah, love that. And also to be able to lead the individuals on their team, because you just use the term one size does not fit all.
Mhm.
Right? How do we ensure that we're hearing from everybody on the team? How do we ensure that we're building a workplace that works for everybody? So, yeah, thank you
Mhm.
very much for sharing that. And Tan, I'll just finish up with you about what does this look like in your organization? Is it innate? How do you develop? What do you think?
So I think for HR team, I think we can create an environment where it's more likely that we're going to be able to develop great leaders. And what I think about a system that quite successful is to have leaders that more of a player coach. And
Okay.
at that core, that means that aligning rewards with innovations. Because for a team, we need to have the psychological safety to be able to
Yeah.
pivot, to try new things, to know that, not everything is going to be working for the very first time. And I
Mm.
think if we have that effective strategies that you keep iterating on and you keep, allowing people to innovate, to try new things for leaders, um, and have that problem solving at every single step of the way, I think it will create this environment, this reward structure, the system to be able to give us more higher chance of success because I think like leadership still
Mhm.
needs to be like it is a journey. It needs to be
Yeah.
developed uh
Yeah.
uh throughout time.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's the systems. It's what Justin was talking about this sort of, it isn't one or the other, right? It's enabling. It's putting the processes in place. I think we're going to end there because I apologize, we're over time, but really, really wanted to thank our panelists today, Robert, Justin, and Tan, for your insights. I know you put your details in LinkedIn. Please connect with them. Some great, great ideas that you can take away. And thank you for being here today, helping us helping to be part of our mission to build a better world by helping organizations become great places to work for all. And if you are looking to survey your employees, reach out to us at Great Place to Work. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you next month for the next in our Insight webinar series. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks,
Bye. Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a
Thank
lovely afternoon.
you. Bye.